Hi, today I'll be teaching about the conditioned behavioral learning theory attributed to Ivan Pavlov. We will learn about the man, his interests, his work, and his conceptual theory. At the end, I'll bring two questions for you to answer, so have pen and paper ready. Who was Ivan Pavlov? Born in Russia, 1949, Ivan Petrovich Pavlov was an eminent Russian physiologist and psychologist who devised the concept of the conditioned reflex. He formulated a conceptual theory, highlighting the significance of conditioning and associating human behavior with the nervous system. Surprisingly, his earliest studies were focused on theology, but reading Charles Darwin's On the Origin of the Species had a powerful influence on his future interests. He soon abandoned his religious studies and devoted himself to the study of science. In 1875, received the degree of Candidate of Natural Sciences and conducted neurophysiological experiments with animals for years after receiving his doctorate at the Academy of Medical Surgery. He became fully convinced that human behavior could be understood and explained best in physiological terms rather than in mentalist terms. So what led Ivan Pavlov to commence work on behavior? He was doing research on the physiology of digestion in dogs. The process began by presenting the dog with a meat powder. He noticed that the dog would start salivating in response to the powder. But then he further noticed that the dog would generate saliva before being presented with meat powder. By taking a closer look to the dog's behavior, he noticed that the dog was responding to the presence of the lab technician who would normally feed him. But why was the dog responding to the lab technician by salivating? It was evident that the dog had made a connection or association. The presence of the lab technician meant that he was to be fed. So how was Ivan Pavlov to test his hypothesis? He decided to use a device for the dog to make an association with when food was presented along with it. That device was a bell, and the association would be triggered by the sounding of the bell. Let us look at the following 4 pictures to illustrate Ivan Pavlov's findings. Let's use the first pair of pictures to illustrate behavior. The picture on the left shows 2 images, the dog and the food. Let's think of the food as producing a stimulus, and let's think of the dog responding to the food. We can all relate to this scenario. The food just elicits a natural reaction. No one needs to learn how to salivate. It happens through our sensory skills. It is automatic. The food is an unconditioned stimulus, and the dog reacts with an unconditioned response in the form of salivation to help digest the food. Now let's look at the right image. The dog is presented with a ringing bell, but there's no salivation as a response from the dog. Therefore, we can say that the ringing bell is just a neutral stimulus that elicits no salivation response. Now let's look at the next 2 pictures. The left image shows the ringing bell, the food, and the salivating dog. It is evident that the dog responds to the food by way of salivation, but still we say that the dog offers an unconditioned response since the food is in sight. The response is natural. automatic. But how can Ivan Pavlov have the dog salivate to the sight and sound of just the bell? Let's look one more time to the left picture. What he did was repeatedly present this scenario to the dog at feeding time. Bell plus food generates salivation from the dog. And this led to the events shown on the image on the right. Ivan Pavlov would now present the dog with the ringing bell. In response, the dog would salivate. This means that the dog has been conditioned to the ringing of the bell. In the dog's mind, the bell offers a conditioned stimulus, and the dog's salivation is called a conditioned response. The dog has learned to respond to the bell in a specific way. Ivan Pavlov has successfully tested his hypothesis. Now I'm curious about my experiences. Looking at our own behavior, we can probably identify some of those conditioned responses that we have learned to provide. I'll give you an example. When a car pulls in my driveway, I immediately go and unlock the house's front door. But why would I do that? Would it make sense for me to wait for the bell to ring? Then peek through the peeping hole and see who it is? It looks like I've been conditioned. I unlock the door as a conditioned response because time after time, it has been my wife, the one needing entrance to the house. I'll give you another example. This one related to my kids. When I enter the house carrying bags, my kids come out of the rooms asking, "Where's the food? What do you bring us to eat, Dad?" They're already asking these questions while walking on the hallway before even seeing me. Why did they do it? I have to say 99.999% of the time, there is some type of an edible item in the bags I bring to the house. I guess a lot of our kids' responses are conditioned responses. In summary, Ivan Pavlov was able to demonstrate that once learned, a conditioned stimulus is to generate the same response that an unconditioned stimulus would generate. We call it the classical behavior conditioning learning theory. He received a Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine in 1904 for his work on digestive secretions and died in 1936 at the age of 86. Now it's time for you to interact with me. I have 2 questions for you. The first one, think of 2 to 3 conditioned responses that you provide as a reaction to a conditioned stimulus you experience. Write them down, and at the end of the presentation, I would like you to post them. The second question is, during your daily living activities, do you feel you respond to conditioned stimulus more so than unconditioned stimulus? Why or why not? Until next time, have a pleasant day and make it an unconditioned response.